Welcome back to my channel where I discuss fantasy Formula 1, my drivers, my constructors, my strategies, my chips, my transfers, and more. The Australian Grand Prix has concluded and the results are in. Max Verstappen DNFs. I've been saying that he doesn't DNF in pretty much all of my videos, but he usually doesn't. His last time not finishing a race was Australia 2022. That's 2 years ago. He has finished every race in the past 2 years. So no one could have predicted him not finishing this one. If you had him, if you put your DRS boost on him, do not feel too bad. Your choice to put a DRS boost on Max Verstappen is always correct if you have Max Verstappen in your team. So don't beat yourself up too much if you got that large negative from his DNF. There will be more points for Max Verstappen in the future, I am certain. What's on the agenda today? Well, we're going to discuss my team and how I performed. Then we're going to talk about mine and all assets and how their performance in Australia has changed or not changed our view on them as assets going into Japan, China, Miami, and beyond. Then we're going to discuss some different team structures that I think currently look very strong. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about, well, my transfers and what I'm eyeing up going into Japan. So if that sounds interesting, stick around and we'll get right to it. When I said we would get right into it, I did lie. First, I just want to briefly mention what F1 Fantasy Hub and many others echoed over on Twitter, and that is that it took F1 Fantasy 32 hours to update the scores after the Australian Grand Prix. And that's a long time. After a Formula 1 race, if you're a fantasy manager, you want to go in and look at your team and see how your team performed pretty soon. I understand that it takes some time to go through overtakes and that it takes some time since they do like a batch of price changes, and those are the price changes that are then there for, up until the next Grand Prix. So I understand that they take time, but 32 hours after a race, most people, and definitely all the casual fans, have completely forgotten about F1 and especially F1 Fantasy. So to not be able to see it that quickly is kind of disappointing. F1 Fantasy Hub posted, it has been almost 24 hours since the Australian Grand Prix concluded, but the fantasy scores for the weekend are still not finalized. It is disappointing that a game with 2 million plus teams, developed by a sport that earned more than 3.2 billion in revenue in 2023, can be undone by something as simple as calculating overtakes. This holds back a product that F1 continues to invest and promote. The game is blah blah blah, and you can read the entire thing, pause it and read it if you want. I completely echo all of this. People will stop playing the game if it takes 32 hours for the scores to update. And if it is going to take 32 hours for the scores to update, perhaps the entire system needs to change, right? Maybe there should be dynamic price increases and price decreases, similar to how it is in Fantasy Premier League, so that you can just calculate the overtakes and do it immediately. If it's just the overtakes and not like the prices, that's the problem, which it seems to be. Perhaps a different thing needs to be. Perhaps you don't even get points for overtakes anymore, and you only get points for positions gained. Now that would probably need to change how we structure our teams in terms of prices. Like the whole pricing dynamic of the game would have to change, and it's a larger structural change to the game that might make the game worse. But I do believe that if the results for the game came out 1 hour after and we didn't have overtake points versus 32 hours and we have overtake points, I think the 1 hour option is better. So yeah, it is a problem. I'm hoping it gets better. It was a long time to wait for the scores to finalize. So let's finally go and check out my scores for the Australian Grand Prix. So when discussing my team and my result for the Australian Grand Prix, it can only be summed up as this. I made all the correct choices, but I made all the wrong choices at the same time. And if that doesn't make sense, allow me to explain what has happened here, okay? If you didn't watch my transfer plans video last week or my team selection video, these were the choices I was faced with, alright? I was going to sell the Mercedes constructor to bring in Red Bull Racing, to do that, I had to sell Max Verstappen for another premium driver. And then I was going to sell, with my third transfer, one of my underperforming cheap assets for another one that I thought would have a good opportunity to increase in price. All right? All those three choices, I believe, are correct. They were the right choices. But how were they the wrong choices? Well, the options I have when faced with these choices were, well, for the Red Bull Racing one, or for the Mercedes, selling Mercedes, it was always going to be Red Bull Racing. It was never going to be McLaren. So that one's correct. For Max Verstappen, I mean, I brought Max Verstappen out the one race he DNFs and did get a massive negative on my DRS boost driver. That is massive. How I've managed to perfectly hit that week is beyond me. That is unbelievably lucky, so that was definitely the correct choice to sell Max Verstappen. But I had the option to bring in either Checo or Leclerc. I was never going to bring in Sainz, so even though he got the most points, I'm leaving him out of this. My options were Leclerc and Checo. And after qualifying, it looked great. Checo qualified in P3, Leclerc qualified in P5. I even responded to a comment after qualifying on my team selection video saying, "This looks great. I cannot see Charles Leclerc outscoring Checo from P5 unless he gets driver of the day or fastest lap." What I didn't know at that time of posting that comment was that Checo impeded Hülkenberg in Q1, and he ended up receiving a penalty later on in that day. That was never even shown on the broadcast, so I had no idea that happened. That was never shown on the broadcast. I did not know that had happened. So Checo got demoted, Leclerc moved up to 4th, and it ended up being the wrong decision. So I made the wrong decision there. Then for my cheap driver, this is the funny part, Yuki Tsunoda, I was so disappointed with the Racing Bulls. I really didn't like them as an option. I thought we were going to qualify in P12 and finish the race in P12. I was convinced, right? Then I was also scared about Williams not having a chassis. So I didn't know if I wanted to keep Albon. So for my third transfer, it was either sell Albon or sell Yuki. And then for my transfer in, it was either Kevin Magnussen or Pierre Gasly. And I ended up going with the worst combination. I sold Yuki and I brought in Pierre Gasly. If I'd sold Yuki for Magnussen, it would have been fine. If I'd sold Albon for Pierre Gasly, it would have also been fine. If I'd sold Albon for Magnussen, it would have been the best possible outcome. But I chose the worst outcome, which was sell Yuki for Pierre Gasly. Yuki had an amazing race. If not for the 3 DNFs, he would probably not have finished in the points. He would have probably been P11. So the DNFs definitely... he would have been P10 then after Alonso's penalty. So he still would have gotten a point and probably would have increased in price. But whatever. That week is over. You can see my result here. I ended the week with an overall rank of 136,000. Is that what it says? 135,000. 136,000 global rank. Now, it is a red arrow there, but that's because it's a red arrow after the provisional points. My global rank going into this race was 177,000. So it is actually a 40k green arrow and not a red arrow. So it's still a positive race because I took out Mercedes and Max Verstappen, but it could have been so much better if I had just selected any of the other options that were available to me with the transfers I was going to make. So switching view here, you can see that each of my cheap drivers decreased in price by 0.1 million despite getting positive scores. Ferrari continues to be the best constructor available for the price. They're unbeatable, increasing another 1 million. If you don't have them, you should get them in as soon as possible. Checo increasing 0.3 is still good. I can't complain about that, but Leclerc and Sainz increasing 1 million makes this hurt even more. At least the 2 transfers I made in those regards did great. Red Bull not decreasing in price at all, but or not changing in price at all, rather. But Mercedes decreased by 0.5 million, and Max Verstappen decreased by 0.7, which is a big decrease. So lucky to avoid those, but my team value is not looking great. It's not bad. It's at 102 million, but it's not fantastic, and I've seen way higher team values online. Again, Checo, still a good pick, just not as good as Charles Leclerc was. Albon did not have a disastrous race by any means, but he got overtaken by both the Haas's. Lucky for Hulkenberg with the safety car, or the virtual safety car rather, when Hamilton had to retire. Made it so that he pitted ahead of Albon, and Albon could not get past. Albon had an option to make it stick, but Hulkenberg just is too good at defending, and then Magnussen overtook Albon later on in the race, leaving him outside of the points completely. Alpine still looked terrible, race pace-wise, but Pierre Gasly started from behind, started from almost as far back as you can, and made some positions up with the DNFs and got one overtake or two. I can't actually remember what he got. He made one overtake and gained 4 positions in the race, so a decent result. It's not enough to warrant an increase in price, unfortunately, but had he had 1 or 2 more overtakes, I do think there was an option for him to increase in price instead. So not a terrible transfer again. The Saubers, man, they're wheel nuts. What is going on? I think, honestly, I'm very unlucky sitting with these 2 assets right now in my team, because they could have been on massive scores in all of these Grand Prix had they not had that disastrous wheel nut. Just have a 5-second pit stop. I'm not asking for greatness. I'm not asking you to beat Red Bull, Ferrari, or McLaren in terms of your pit stops. I'm not asking you to have a 2.1 second pit stop. A 5-second pit stop would be enough at this point. 5 seconds. You can take double the time of all the other teams, and they would still be gaining points. Both Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas had disastrous pit stops in this race, which left them all the way at the back with the Alpines. Surely it must get better. Surely it must get better. It is driving me up a wall that they cannot just have a normal race. Just have a normal, slow pit stop, and both of these assets would be scoring points and increasing in price. We saw when Zhou Guanyu's 11-pointer in Bahrain when he had normal pit stops, and then both in Saudi Arabia and in Australia he had slow pit stops, ended up at the back of the field, race ruined. In Saudi he would have had a decent point score. In Australia he wouldn't have an even better one. Starting from the pit lane, it looked fantastic. You know, Zhou Guanyu from 19th, you love to see that. But he just couldn't do anything. Oh my god. It is very, very frustrating that they keep decreasing in price. But surely they must have a faultless race in terms of their pit stops soon. And when they do, they're gonna start increasing in price. So I'm not gonna talk about every asset this time around. I did do that, and then I realized that took like 35-40 minutes because I have so much to say about every asset. I do think it's important to know what assets are good and not, and how our perceptions of assets change, because in 3 races, you know, if you asked me at the start of the race which assets I was the least interested in, I would have said Haas. And now they are at the top if you're, you know, comparing them with other cheap assets in the game. So updating your perception on the assets and going through all of the assets and seeing how the price changes increase or decrease the value of them as assets, not of, you know, the actual driver and their actual value, but the value of their value to us as managers. So what I will do in the off week leading up to Japan, so next week, I will post a video, or I'll make a video rather, discussing each asset and making a tier list of them. So expect that coming up while we eagerly await the Japanese Grand Prix. But for now, I'm just going to quickly mention a few of them. Ferrari, is probably the most essential asset in the game. I think every team needs to have the Ferrari constructor. I don't even think that's negotiable. I was saying that Max Verstappen was essential early. I think Ferrari is actually essential. Aston Martin, my perception of them has changed considerably. I do think it's probably the third best assets in terms of your constructors. Maybe if you're saying that RB and Haas are better because they're cheaper, I can see you demoting them. But I think Aston Martin is better than McLaren and Mercedes now. I had Mercedes earlier. If you don't have the money to go to Red Bull, or you're looking to make a Red Bull-less team, I did receive a comment about that. My go-to constructor pairing would actually be this. It would be Ferrari Aston. Yes, you are running the risk with Lance Stroll, and I mean, this is not bad either. But when Ferrari and Red Bull are finishing 1, 2, 3, 4, and McLaren are not clearly better than Mercedes or Fernando Alonso, you run the risk. And at their price point, I just don't see how they're worth 3 million more than Ferrari. So this combination is actually pretty good, and I do like Aston Martin as an option more now. For the cheaper assets, it's always Haas and RB right now. The other three I wouldn't even touch with a stick. In terms of drivers, both the Ferrari drivers look great. The result last race showed that. Checo even said that himself, that Ferrari would have won even if Max didn't DNF. And I think that's actually true. And it kind of shows that Ferrari are closer to the Red Bull than they are to the Mercedes and McLaren. So Ferrari look great. Quick mention is that if you are currently sitting without any of the Ferrari drivers, like I'm sitting with Checo as my premium driver of choice. If you're looking to transfer in either Charles Leclerc or Carlos Sainz this week, I would go for Carlos Sainz over Charles Leclerc. Now, if you already have Charles Leclerc, I would probably just save a transfer. I don't think it's worth using one of your transfers to do. But if you're going from someone else to one of the Ferrari drivers, I think Carlos Sainz is better. Because of the price difference, you can actually build a team with Stroll easier. I know people who have Leclerc and Stroll in, but for someone like me that doesn't have a crazy team value, having Sainz over Leclerc is probably what allows me to have Lance Stroll in. I mean, something like this actually looks really strong, and it would be a consideration for my transfer this week. Had I had 3 transfers available, I would not use a minus 10 point to get these 3 assets in. I would be sitting with this or this. So. But yeah, something like that looks really, really strong, and you can't, at least not with my budget, or if you're following my team, you can't get Charles Leclerc with Lance Stroll without, debilitating your team further, so to say. So if you were to have this, you would have to have Logan Sargent as your third cheap driver. And I don't know if I would want to do that. So having Sainz over Leclerc would allow you to have one of the Haas assets that look so powerful, right? So I really like Carlos Sainz because of that over Charles Leclerc. Other drivers that have changed in perception, the Mercedes are decreasing further for me. Alonso is still too expensive. Lance Stroll, I already mentioned it slightly, but Lance Stroll has gone up a lot for me in terms of an asset. Him increasing 1 million again. At his price point of 12 million, I feel like he's going to keep increasing even if he only gets like a 6-7 pointer. Which I do think it's quite likely he will get, considering he is worse in qualifying. And if he gets beaten by Yuki, by Hulkenberg in qualifying, gets a P12, the pace of that Aston, if he can keep it out of the wall, should be enough for him to get like a P9, P10, and a few overtakes, being in the middle of the pack. So we can't really look at Saudi Arabia, but He made 5 overtakes in Bahrain. He made 3 overtakes in Australia, and I think he made 2 overtakes in Saudi Arabia before he crashed. So just him starting where he is and being more closer to the midfield allows him to overtake the midfield card. So I really like Lance Stroll as an asset, and I do think he's worth the risk, despite his crashes. And as for the back markers, I've already talked about Shogun Yu and Valtteri Bottas. I would actually consider buying them if I didn't have them, and if you're looking to free up points, or taking out your Alpines or your RBs. I probably wouldn't take the Haas's, but if you're looking to make transfers in your cheap drivers, I would actually consider bringing the Saubers, because if they can just fix that wheel nut, they will start to get points and increase in price, and they are so cheap right now. Apart from that, Kevin Magnussen looks like the best option for the back markers right now. And if I'm making just one transfer this week, it's probably to bring K-Mag in for either Pierre Gasly or Alex Albon. So those are some quick thoughts about all the assets. Let's quickly discuss some different team structures, if you will. So I briefly mentioned this structure, and it's kind of similar to what I was running before with Mercedes Ferrari. But the cheaper Aston Martin, which I think is better than the Mercedes constructor, allows you to have some different drivers at your disposal. For one, this. Now, this looks really good. You get to have both Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, so 2 premium drivers, and 1.5, shall we say, premium constructors. You get to have Lance Stroll in there, which I already discussed me liking, and if you have a better cost cap than I do, my cost cap is, as I mentioned earlier, on the lower side. You could even have Magnussen instead of Show here. It's not that much of a stretch. It's actually only 0.2 million. So I could not have a structure like this, but you certainly could. Is this worth it going completely without Red Bull assets? Maybe, if Red Bull don't look to be as dominant. If we get to Japan and we're looking at it and it looks like Ferrari is still like beating Red Bull or able to actually fight with Red Bull, I do think this plus a Kevin looks like a really strong lineup. And if I were going Red Bull less, this is something I would look to approach. I would love to have Magnussen in here. That's just my cost cap. Your cost cap might be stronger. Now, the next obvious sort of lineup that you could run is this one that I showed you previously with one of the Ferrari drivers, Lance Stroll, and then 3 cheaper drivers. I haven't even put a driver in here because with my team value, I could only afford Logan Sargent. And I don't want to have Logan Sargent. With my team value, it would have to be a Carlos Sainz in here. So that I could fit Kevin Magnussen in, and it would be something like this. I think this looks really strong. Between Sergio Perez, Charles Leclerc, and Carlos Sainz, if you could have any of those 3 combined with this setup, I do think that's probably the strongest setup in the game currently. One problem that I discussed at the start of the season, and the reason why I thought that Max Verstappen would be essential, is that it's hard to predict which one of the other drivers, apart from Max Verstappen, is gonna get the highest points for the DRS boost. But that was because I thought that McLaren and Mercedes would be closer to Ferrari. So really, between Checo, Charles, and Sainz, it's gonna differ. And it's very much a get lucky type of guess. But in terms of the other assets, these 4 are what I would consider to be the strongest that you would fit in a regular team. And if you could have Checo or Charles Leclerc with that over Carlos Sainz, I would at least probably have Checo. But I don't know, maybe Ferrari look really good, but being able to switch between them, right? So if Red Bull look really strong or Ferrari look bad, you can have Checo, and if Ferrari look really good, you can have Carlos Sainz or Charles Leclerc. So that's the second team structure that I think look very strong. The last one is one that I also, I mean, I can kind of afford this one if I have Carlos Sainz, but this one I cannot afford yet. But I've seen people who are able to afford this now. And that is the dream team. Let's just put Nico Hülkenberg in, as he's the 4th cheapest asset, and probably a better asset than Albon. They're close though. I'm, what's that, 2.6 million away, but I've seen people on Twitter who can get this right now. Yes, you have Logan Sargent in, but considering you don't have to worry about the DRS boost, I would look to switch to this probably now, or at least soon. And then a lost sort of wild card-ish draft. Again, it all depends, obviously, if Red Bull and Ferrari are going to keep being very close, or if Red Bull are going to look like they did in the first 2 races of the season. But if Max Verstappen looks to continue to dominate, you could also do something like this. If you are like me and you cannot afford the Max Verstappen Ferrari Red Bull combo, I don't hate the McLaren combo with Ferrari, and then if you're 0.1 more than me, you could fit Nico Hülkenberg in here. I also don't hate this one with, you know, someone like a Fernando Alonso in here. Oh, there you go. We already discussed the Ferrari Aston Martin combo, but we were talking about that as if Ferrari were going to continue to dominate Red Bull. If Red Bull look really, really good, but you don't want to run the Red Bull Racing constructor together with Ferrari, running Aston Martin would allow you to have Alonso together with Max Verstappen. So if Aston look to pick it up and maybe get ahead of Mercedes and McLaren further, and especially Alonso look to challenge for podium positions, something like this could be very strong. But those are sort of the team lineups that I even would consider, and with the Ferrari McLaren combo that I showed you, I've kind of been scraping the bottom of the barrel here. But the strongest one I do think is this one. Just the combo of Ferrari and Red Bull Racing as your constructors look like the by far best option, just because they are the ones getting the fastest pit stop points every race as well. So yeah, those are the sort of team structures that I think look the strongest. Let's quickly talk about my actual team that I have and what transfers I'm considering for the Japanese Grand Prix. It is always fun fantasizing, is it, in F1 fantasy, but we are back to reality, and the reality is that this is my current team. One important thing to note is I used 3 transfers last week, so I only have 2 available to me. And the next race, because we can't just look at the next one, we have to look at the one after that. The one after Japan is China, and China is a sprint race. So one important thing to note is I might want to have 3 free transfers at my disposal going into a sprint weekend. So with that, I have 1 free transfer to use, and the obvious one for me is to bring in Magnussen. I've already discussed how much I like him as an option, and it would probably be for Alex Albon. This would probably be my transfer if I were to make one. It could be Pierre Gasly as well, but I just feel like Pierre Gasly has dropped 3 times in a row. He kind of did what I wanted him to do last race, although he got those penalties, and if not for the DNFs, he would have probably been on a 1-pointer. So Alpine looked bad. I don't know, but if he's going to qualify last or close to last and no one takes engine penalties or starts from the pit lane, then someone DNFs up front, he is very much there to get those kind of points that Ricciardo got this week. I think Ricciardo's 8-pointer, this is sort of like what I'm hoping a Gasly can do. Start 18th and then move up in the race. Something like Ricciardo's 8-pointer is what I'm hoping Gasly can perform. And I don't see Albon getting an 8-pointer unless he does a Yuki Tsunoda and puts it P7. So for that reason, I think Albon is the one to go for me. And of the options to bring in, K-Mag, I feel, is the obvious one. So that's the one transfer. The other thing I'm considering is Ferrari going to challenge Red Bull? Actually challenge Red Bull at Suzuka? And if that's the case, do I want to sell Checo? And considering I don't have Lance Stroll, I can actually just choose between Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, because Checo is the more expensive of the two. So I could just pick any one of the Ferrari drivers, but that's very much a wait and see. Look at free practice, see how the pace and the setups and how comfortable Red Bull are with their car. But it's a switch I could make for my second free transfer. Now, ideally, like I showed with the team structures, I would bring this to a Lance Stroll, which I could afford if it's Carlos Sainz over Charles Leclerc. But that would cost 3 transfers, or 2 transfers and keep Albon, or, you know, it would be keep Gasly probably. Where you see? There he is. Like this. So that could also be my 2 transfers. Those are the options I'm considering. It is very much a wait and see, especially with selling Perez immediately after buying him in. That is only going to happen if Ferrari looks strong enough. Something that I mentioned was that I prefer Sainz over Leclerc, because you can fit Stroll in. But I actually prefer Sainz over Leclerc, even if I don't make that and only make the K-Mag. I should do in this order. K-Mag, the K-Mag transfer. It leaves me a lot of budget. So if assets were to drop, I can then bring in Lance Stroll next week, and I don't have to rely on price increases or decreases in order to fit in Stroll. So that's one reason. But the other reason is just that Carlos Sainz is that much cheaper. And if he just beats Leclerc in a race, which he's very capable of doing, he has a higher ceiling to increase in price because of his cheaper price. Since it's loosely based on points per million, I believe. So for that reason, I prefer Sainz over Leclerc, if I were to bring in a Ferrari driver as one of my transfers. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. It was probably a very long one. Look forward to the full asset overview and tier list coming either this weekend or in the beginning of next week. And then we have my team selection video, obviously, will be out on Friday after free practice 2. If there's any other sort of video that you want me to make, such as the chip strategy video that I posted last week, which if you haven't checked it out, you totally should. I think it's a pretty good one, and it shows my chip strategy for the rest of the season. Please let me know in the comments. I do like to talk about things, and some things I might not have even considered discussing or thinking about. So you just mentioning it in the comments makes me think about it, and that automatically makes me a better manager and I guess better content creator as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I can't wait for Suzuka. I can't wait for Ferrari to keep being dominant. It is the reality I live for. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Bye.